Ready. All right. Today is Wednesday, June 11th, 2025 already. The time is 4 p.m. on the dot, and we're going to open this joint planning commission and council meeting. So am I running this? I'm not the chair, so of the meeting. Who is it?
Yeah, the mayor is the executive person, but
I'll do it. So call to order. So we have Councilor Gunderson here. Well, why don't you guys just do it for yourselves?
Mark Anderson, City Council.
Brandon Sundin, City Council.
Brooke Cisco, Planning Commission.
Jim Massey, Mayor.
Russ Hubbard, planning, or not planning, city council. What?
James Sim, Planning Commission, and also Parks and Trails. Since we're doing that also.
Penny Kingsbury, Planning Commission.
Right. So discussion topics. So discussion of Parks Commission's Wood Reserve proposal.
yeah, so in December, the Parks Commission presented this woodland reserve concept to the council. The council was wowed enough that we want to continue thinking about it. But the general direction at the time was to fine tune the boundary because it was just this concept before. And so Scott Jacobson and I met in March, worked on it a little bit, and then said, well, the joint meeting makes sense to discuss this further, to see where everybody's at. And so here we are. My intent is I have some slides to discuss kind of the boundary considerations to help with the discussion. I don't know if our Parks Commission visitors would like to talk about it at all before we get into that or not.
Yeah, I would love to.
Yeah, if you go to the table, it's probably the most appropriate in this case.
Thank you so much. I'm Dana Lathrop from the Parks and Trails Commission, current chair. And so, as they were mentioning, we've been working on the Woodland Reserve proposal for quite a long time now. It's been a project that's been quietly in the works for a couple of years. It's in tandem with the Port of Columbia County due to the property there on one side being city owned and on the other side port owned. With the future goal of it being including walking trail and other public use services for related to parks. And the ultimate end vision is not fully put together, partially in respect to the current state of the city with finances, ability to get a large market, up and going, and some of the other projects that are still unfolding. But the timeliness of preserving the location is paramount due to the fact that some of the area nearby is, potentially being developed, making sure that we hold the land available for the future projects. And so that
Also, setting aside, there is a lot of people go back there and camp, and this might give a little more protection for it burning down or something.
right, so making it intended use that's more on the city's radar, it has more foot traffic. We don't bring some of the camping or other less intentioned uses that the public does.
And we were hoping, Sean Clark was hoping to make today. We had a conflict with his schedule, and Elliot Levine I'm hoping it comes here at any minute because pressed with another meeting. So they can speak on what the report feels about it, and they're quite fond of it. No, I'm not, trying not to speak for them, just that they are very positive about the whole concept.
Okay, well, great. Thank you for that. I think we'll get into these slides and to the discussion. And we are talking about the city property component of it, not
Yes.
Correct.
here today. So first slide, just to give us some of our bearings as far as what region of town that we're in. Front and center in this photograph is the old Boise Mill. We're just south of the treatment lagoon. McCormick Park is in the upper left-hand corner. Sauvie Island there to the right. And then the wilderness area in the lower left quadrant of this slide is kind of the focus area. And a lot of that's city and some of it's port as well. So just an aerial photo to get us our bearings. So then let's look at this property a little bit closer. So these are some exhibits prepared for Project Arcadia. Those are the folks that want to reacquire the mill and get it up and running. And then also, and that's the green shaded parcel there. And then the red shaded parcel is one intended for a PGE substation. The substation in particular is important because it's kind of hugging the desired area. And when we think about these boundaries, the fate of that is an important aspect of that. Now, this is a concept. Project Arcadia will probably morph in the future from what's shown here because of some DEQ pollution issues that came up that kind of changed some of their future plans. And then the PGE substation. So PGE, they finally got us this list about the things they would consider whether or not they would want to proceed with this parcel as the substation parcel. And that's probably months away. And so this is what we know right now. And so that's our platform for discussion. One thing I want to note on here is the southwest extension of the Castor Road right-of-way that's shown in both of the exhibits. It's kind of a shaded gray on the aerial photo and just a white line on the non-aerial photo. And there's a right angle there. That's a potential intersection. And that could be a boundary. That's just right by the old Boise Park. If you know what I'm talking about, I know the Parks Commission had mentioned that. And then another thing I want to mention is from that Castor extension, a road that would continue in a southeast direction. There's that dashed line that represents a gravel road. And then you can kind of see a berm that's on the west side of the pot farm parcel, which makes a nice boundary for the Woodland Reserve area. So the next slide, we're gonna look at our parcelization plan. So this is the parcelization concept. This is not something that is mandated by law. It's a concept just to help us think about this property. And note the extension of Castor Road that in this case goes much further. And there's kind of an intersection there, and that is roughly where that PGE parcel was located. And so this is an important slide for the discussion, because one of it is going to be, well, do we explore having viable industrial land for industrial purposes, or do we recognize the coolness factor and preserve it for nature, which is kind of the Parks Commission or the Parks Commission's goal. So if we go to the next one, same map, I just scribbled on it. So the red scribbles are the PGE parcel, and then the other ones represents kind of the preliminary boundary of the Woodland Reserve. And I wanted you to understand how that interacts with some of the potential parcels for the purposes of this discussion. So the next map is a base map. This was prepared for the Parks Commission about a year ago when they started discussing it. We just wanted to understand generally where things were at, floodplain, blue, wetlands, riparian area, that's in yellow. You can see the creek there, and then anything on the west side of the creek is port. If it's on the east side, it's city. And this is important because if it's a massive wetland, like you see there on the south side, it's arguably more ripe for protection than otherwise.
Sure. While we're looking at this map, to also take into consideration, for those of you who have not been, present or watching any of the Parks and Trails, meetings while we've been discussing this. There's so much land in there that has, elements that are really unique to this area, including the Camas fields and other natural elements. One of our new commission members, Lucas, has been identifying different flora throughout the region that are really unique and really rare, but we happen to have in this particular location, which would be not just in some of the like 100-year floodplain area, but some of the area that's outside of that boundary. It would be really important long term to preserve, just due to the nature of the plants themselves and the history and the fact that they are becoming less and less abundant.
I can add to that. Here, what we're looking at is what 2 and 3 on this map.
So then we need to, so this is, sorry to interrupt, just to keep us organized in the visual. So this is a base map we prepared for the Parks Commission. I do have a hard copy here. If anybody wants to see the hard copy close up, I can pass this along. If nobody takes it, I'm assuming nobody cares. And then, and so that's to be scribbled on if desired. And the intent of this was to help the Parks Commission think about the boundary. What ended up happening is Scott just came to my office in March, and that's when we just came up with the next slide, which is that same map, but just scratches on it, had scratches. And then we'll kind of use this to guide the discussion. So let's go.
Okay, thank you. 2 and 3 on the map. These are the 2 areas that are not within the riparian zone of the 100-year flood. So those are the 2 that basically we're discussing about this delineation. So we have number 3 is right now is during the springtime, it's a huge cancer. Number 2 is a little fun in there. Both of these areas will be challenging to construct anything. John, I agree with that. You can agree with fully with the delineation because it kind of covers as industrial and
What's the one with the?
so also I'd like to mention that we do have a huge surplus of industrial within our industry. So, but another mitigating factor is that we do have a railroad bridge there, and that does access some of this town. So, but that can still be utilized, you know, when if that was down the road need to be used for you know, whatever comes. So
Now, what I would like to do is start from the southern side and move northward. To talk about the areas, you kind of prime that, but that was my intent, just to have an organized discussion. No, but I want to, working from the bottom northward,
that's fine.
Yeah. That's okay. We're shepherding a lot of people in discussion, and so organized discussion, that's what it's all about. So right now, it's hard to make a final call because of PGE and Project Cardia, but we're getting this discussion to help with future direction. So below Area 3, this is the very bottom area. So we have the massive wetland, we have the floodplain. On one side, we have the creek. On the other side, we have a road on top of a berm that's right along the west side of the Pop Farm property. And then we have the railroad on the south side. So a lot of nice boundaries, floodplain, wetland. I'm assuming that that is a pretty slam dunk area that most would agree is appropriate for woodland reserve. And so how do you feel about that? Is that a statement that sounds logical to everybody?
Can I ask first, has everybody been down in that site at all?
Yeah. Yeah,
Have an idea what that.
yeah, I do.
So we're not in number 3 yet. We're below number 3.
I would say yes, but me. Makes sense.
And I'm going to assume no conversation is tacit for agreement. Okay. So now we move into Area 3. And so this is that question of industrial parcels or not. So industrial parcels versus coolness factor, preservation, however you want to coin it. So Scott kind of introduced this, but we did recently adopt an economic opportunities analysis, which analyzed our industrial land inventory. And for that, we have about 243 acres of buildable acres. That's a lot of acreage. And for the 20-year planning horizon, 2025 to 2045, based on that economic opportunities analysis, we need 29 acres. So we have a surplus of 214. All right, a lot of surplus. But the question that we have to ask ourselves in the context of the economic opportunities analysis is this prime industrial land or not? And that wasn't defined by the economic opportunities analysis. This is something that we have to think about. And so this is a good example where we have to put on our thinking caps and thinking, is it prime or not? And so then some of the things that could, and I'm not trying to argue either way, I'm just trying to make sure everybody's thinking about everything. So it's close to potential utility extensions because we are talking about extending water sewer through that property. It would be close to a PGE substation, so for electrical needs. And it's in a place that's less situated to be a nuisance to other properties. In other words, it's a good place for your traditional industrial property that would, bug neighbors. And it's potentially also at a noteworthy street intersection. So those would be the arguments if you wanted to think about, is it prime or not? And I don't know what the answer is. It's just kind of really how the city feels. And that's why we have these joint meetings.
And we got the railroad too. That's important.
So
Is it usable?
Well, so if I can make a comment, so if I'm comparing the parcels that are delineated on the map, and you compare that to what is in the floodplains, what really is not ideal developmental purposes, right? Then what is still left in the area marked 3 would be maybe half of parcel 36, maybe half of parcel 37, a good portion of parcel 33, and a good portion of parcel 32. The rest of that is all lying in the floodplain region, right? And so, so of the, the kind of pre-planned parcel, well, and yeah, because even parcel 36 is completely within the floodplain boundary. So
And I wouldn't get too obsessed with the parcelization plan. It's very conceptual.
Sure.
And looking at it again, you know, it's probably a little overkill
Right.
when you consider all constraints. But this little portion it's a portion of the property that's not encumbered by wetlands or floodplain, and so you don't have those kind of restrictions. So it's close to that area, and that's where it becomes, okay, are the other natural amenities that you're seeing there, the unique features, is that enough for the city council, who ultimately have that decision, to be like, oh, okay, yeah, has the potential to be good industrial land because it's not encumbered by those natural issues.
Eventually also, the land itself is challenging.
Sure,
Not
yeah.
the greatest chunk of land for,
And
you can do develop it. But
And also in the future, you know, with the Milton Creek project, while we've been really focusing on the, you know, potential walkways and whatnot going alongside, you know, both sides of the creek. But if we're considering the city property, potentially utilizing the future, that area to make an area that is still city owned, but then is buildable in a way that can be catered to use by, you know, future industrial businesses in the area. So having this would be an area that would be prime for structures or, you know, amenities like permanent restrooms or anything like that in the future, or other long-term structures that can be utilized by the other industries potentially in the area. So because it's out of the floodplains, it would be, if it's something that could be used to build industry, it's something that would be more stable for long-term amenities and public use. And I think a thought for long-term future.
I would just add, Scott mentioned it, but number 3 is really the main part of that property that's not forested. So it is, everybody knows what we're talking about when we say Camas Meadow. So if you look up on Liberty Hill and you see that purple hue in the spring, that used to be all over St. Helens, and now there's very few places where that's left. And a lot of people come to the city asking for help protecting Liberty Hill because Knife River is wanting to turn that into a quarry. And very little that the city can do because that's outside of city limits. This isn't city limits, this is city property. So a unique opportunity to preserve something that was once very important to the community and very important to the natives that lived here that relied on it for food. Like I say, this is really, there's a small patch in McCormick Park, but this is probably the biggest existing patch of camas in this meadow right in this area. So it is kind of a unique area.
And just so you have an understanding of scale, you'll see the little number written in the 1400 Hampton Road property, 8.6 acres. So number 3, the area outside of that is a little bit larger than that. A pretty good chunk. So that seems, in my eyes, number 3 could be one of the more controversial issues because it is unencumbered from a regulatory standpoint, but it does have a lot of cool stuff and unique stuff going on.
those have also the historical component for you. So that's number 2.
Sorry, one more time, what did you say?
It's there's coring.
Okay, Corey.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
historical.
yeah, I just couldn't be here.
If you walk through this property, there's quite a few small areas where you can, when they used to make the Belgian blocks for the streets, and most of them were shipped to Portland, but there were quarries all over St. Helens, but they're dotted throughout this property. You can still see the remnants of the old quarries, which is kind of cool.
I knew we'd get a history lesson. I
Yeah.
knew it. That's what I was here for.
But they're dotted all throughout this area.
I will say too, Dana, you sort of brought this up about the trail along the river. I just wanted to point out the reason that there's sort of this dotted pedestrian path in the parcelization plan is because our Parks and Trails plan identifies a trail connection from McCormick Park all the way to the Columbia River. And so just to point out that even if parcel 3 were developed industrially, the city would want to make sure that we have some type of pedestrian connection through what could be private development. And so if you're worried about the reserve, the Woodland Reserve, having connections, like if it's disparate properties, that river trail could be a connecting factor between sort of disparate areas. So just pointing that out.
Thank you. Industry wise, they're the ones that are gonna pay for building this park and taking care of it, all their tax dollars. So if you shut them out totally, you're not gonna have any industry to pay for what you want. So I think you've got to really take a hard look on, instead of grabbing a whole area, creatively allowing the industrial, you've got an area here that's gonna have water and sewer and a brand new substation, which is gonna be killer for power that's when a business comes to town. That's what they gotta find out. They don't have power, they won't go there. But this is gonna be pretty top notch PGE wise. And so I think if you've got your setbacks off the creek. And then those areas that Brandon was talking about, the quarry sites and such. If areas could be identified. And maybe those could be a parcel that might be a set aside and work your all your sites around the special places. It's not going to save all the counties, but I think we do have to worry about shutting industry out.
So your idea would be to scalpel a little bit more.
Yeah, just don't say nothing could happen in this area. It would be like, let's develop it to a degree and then leave some areas that are more consequential to the history and whatever. It might be a pretty interesting industrial park because as you see them today, they're all tilled ups and they're, solid concrete. But if you had parcels between buildable parcels and such, it might be very attractive for some businesses down there. And yes, to be able to take your break or whatever and walk the creek and do that. But I think once you keep restricting it so much that this is going to be small businesses in here anyway. There'll be nothing large, and that's very nice.
It's about 8 acres.
And
That's not enough for a big industry. Power for a smaller company is gonna be a lot more expensive coming out of PGE than it is P.
well, that's what they've got because you guys didn't take it over.
I
You should have bought it years ago.
think that was a decision before we were around. But I guess, have you guys talked to the tribes at all to see if there's any sort of associated tribe jurisdiction through here?
It is something that we discussed, but we have not.
Okay, they have a really great website that can lead you through some of these things if you guys want to check it out.
Plus, on the southern portion, there's the city of Milton, the town of Milton, it remains. Not sure if we think possible. Remains.
It's one thing, I don't know how much of it fits on this parcel, but if the map went just a little bit further down to where Milton Creek runs into the bay, that was a huge native settlement that was documented when Lewis and Clark came through the area, that there was a big native community there. And then Scott touched on it, but there used to be a separate city of Milton there, which at one time was larger than St. Helens. But just based on its location, it flooded all the time. So
And it could be because number 3 is higher ground around there. And it has been knocked about, right? And that can be also have a high potential of Native American remains in there.
And it doesn't even have to be remains. There's a lot more to it. You should go look at that website. I would encourage that. I mean, if we are digging or drilling in a right of way, any right of way or anywhere that they have jurisdiction, a dike somewhere along the water, and we find an arrowhead, we have to stop digging immediately and call an archaeologist. So there's a lot to it. I would just encourage you to look at those websites and see if that might help.
we're looking to build is actually pretty low income.
No, I'm saying it might,
But for future development as far as.
yeah, I'm saying it might help your cause.
Yeah, I know, I understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of my background.
Do you have any idea what the port plans to do with that side of the creek?
Based on our discussions with them, they are willing to donate to this cause, the land along the side for the connecting trail, so that it would run on their side.
We had a meeting, Jerry Culture and I with Sean Parker. Olin and Tina and Elliot, and what they were talking about themselves on this parcel of land, they are happy for us to go ahead with the trail. They're happy, they seem to be, they have no issues with, because since there's a lot of drainage through there, the trail can't go right next to that creek. So they're happy with us to be able to, use places further back for it to get around the drainage. And it seems there would have any true issues with us having auxiliary trails and all that. But they say, what Sean Clark said this is difficult to develop too. So they're not really looking at the potential of anything going on there for a long time, if ever.
I would just add,
Along the creek.
No, all back.
Oh, wow.
They're saying that it's, that parcel is, for the most part, is difficult to develop. So they're looking for alternative. And this alternative here also kind of segues in with their Polk and Talbot site. Because they're trying to do a cap on there and they need some type of redevelopment, and the trail itself is part of that.
It's part of that trail, if I remember correctly. There was gonna be a buffer on either side, right, of the creek. It was 75 feet, was that what it was?
Well, there is a buffer, a legal buffer.
Right. So what is it 75 off each side of the creek? 50 off each side of the
Well,
creek?
and trails are not excluded from being within a buffer or a protection zone. You know,
Right.
there's rules around it, but it's development that can occur.
I mean, one of the leading primary goals of this is actually preservation. I mean, it's interesting, but I'd say very unique area for St. Helens and around, on the economy. I mean, you don't get any trails around here that, go through this type of woodland. And have kind of more of a isolated field. You can go walk on the TV trail, it's a different experience than what you'd have in here and any other trail in the economy. It's only county has trails, but nothing that, this is kind of comparable to what Forest Park. More of that. It's some type of isolation, a true trail, you feel like you're back in nature.
and I'll just add, a lot of the conversation on deciding on the name for this came about because it is intended to be a reserve. It's meant to be low maintenance for the parks because we do have a large park system already that's a lot of maintenance. So this would be low maintenance trails, some trash cans, dog poop stations, just very low maintenance, no playgrounds, nothing like that at this point. So
There is also, interject, an idea that, by the rec center, that portion, if we can, in the future, maybe make it an ADA trail right through there, so some type of experience with the creek.
And there's an increase in, tourism activity as far as, biking and walking trails. And that is something that the Parks and Trails Commission has been working to increase as well here in the St. Helens area with our urban trail mapping and whatnot. And so I'm trying to take advantage of the general public's interest in coming out and visiting these beautiful, unique areas increasing them to come to St. Helens and, spend money in our community while they're out here looking at these really unique locations that they just do not exist elsewhere.
Well,
And
and just to build on that, with Elliot, he's not here, I wish he was, but he intimated that, he's been out on that property a number of times for work. He's never been by the creek, so we went out probably a month and a half ago, and we went out again this past Saturday. And I mean, he was amazed by it, and it has become a huge advocate for the project.
And I would like to comment too, that when we first started talking about this, as a commission, I brought it up as concerns to the rest of the commission about the potential for the city to want to utilize the land, as designated for industrial development, because, as you said, Counselor, these are the people who are going to be ultimately paying for the preservation and for the development and maintenance of the location. So with that in mind too, if we're going to look back at the maps, in reference to the area that is section 3, as you mentioned, having an area that could still be developed that was in that location, but hopefully avoiding some of the old quarry locations and whatnot. The map that has the parcel designations that, that upper almost 2/3 of parcel 37. And again, I recognize that these are just, tentative concept. But that upper 2/3 of parcel 37, in my mind, if I'm going to advocate on the city's behalf of maintaining industrial development land, could potentially be an area to be kept for, industrial development. It would, cut into quite a bit of mechanics and whatnot, but to keep in mind your concern about being right by the utilities and easy access with the road. I could see that, but the rest of it really is so unique in landscape and treading into the more difficult to develop areas. But I just wanted to acknowledge your statements and provide.
So Dana, you're suggesting maybe if you were to compromise in your, boundary along the roadway here, that maybe just this portion could get developed and then this kind of back half.
That would be, if I was to give, give credence to his comments, which are absolutely valid. I recognize that.
Well, and recognizing it's prime industrial land being next to the PGE substation, close to the road, close to utilities.
Exactly.
These would take more development to get to, right? Like you're extending the
Correct.
sewer line longer, you're extending the roadway further, you're further from utilities.
Yep. And that's actually poses more risk of running into, potential artifact.
Closer to the creek.
Exactly. So the further you go that way, the more issues that the city could run into when it comes to developing.
Yeah.
I think Lucas Green on the Parks and Trails Commission, he spent the most time on this property, and I think he would be our biggest help in really trying to narrow down what's important in Area 3. I think he would, he'd be good at that.
I would suggest, go visit the area 3, especially in the spring.
I say it's one thing if you visit it now, and if you were to visit it in April, it looks completely different. So it's, when it's in full bloom, it's impressive.
Then you get a better understanding of work.
Going back to Jacob's comment earlier, though, the yellow and the blue, is everybody feel pretty comfortable with those areas, though, even up closer to area 2, that blue? Is that?
Yeah, so area 2 is kind of like area 3, but just smaller and there's more floodplain. Some potential parcels, but
It is, actually has a lot of points, it has different levels to the area, so it's more difficult even in 3.
so not as ripe for development, and then there is still some parcelization potential. Even if that's woodland reserve between Castor Road and the Castor Road spur. Because they don't have it going past the Castor Road spur.
And then there has been discussion, hasn't there, Jacob, of that spur coming out?
Yes. Yep. So that the spur is sacrificial.
I know, I don't know exactly where it's at, but somewhere right around area two, they mentioned earlier too, was Boise Park. So back in the late sixties, Boise established a developed park there that did have picnic tables and grills and swings
there.
and
Teeter
yeah, that's
totter.
still there under
Yeah.
all the blackberry bushes. So there was, the Parks Commission has talked about in the future, if they were to develop an area, they would like to restore that park, which
Right.
was a very nice place that they'd have employee picnics there. And that was a place mainly for the employees to use, but the community used it as well.
But that's not something that we want to push right now with the cost.
Right.
You're just trying to identify the areas, right now?
Right now we're trying to identify the areas and really kind of blanket preserve it for the
Yeah.
future use because it takes a long time, you know, to go through development and.
With the overall idea of the reserve, nothing, park. Traditional, as you would think, conceptualize it a park. This is, we have something that, you know, is really nice down there and we just want to leave that as is.
I like the quarry part of it too, because you know, there are other local quarry. Great Cliffs is mostly privately owned. So there isn't a park where people can really walk through and see. It's really cool.
Kind of regards.
Yeah, and so there's, I mean, you can walk through there, but the neighbor will get mad. So this is nice.
Well, there's some of it, I mean, especially on the port side, there's Jerry Belcher. Thinks it's pretty black as well. It's just, you know, just like with the water, because they fill these ports filled with water.
Yeah.
And that's another thing with some of this is that, you know, that there are rare plant species in there because of these things that have collected water now that makes it, you know, has a unique, makes it a little more unique too.
Well, in the spring too, if you haven't seen it, but probably right around area two, around April, that fills up with bald eagles, which is a really cool experience. I had never been that close. I think I counted 12 bald eagles just in one little area up in the trees and going down into the creek and they don't come very long, but it's neat when they're there.
There's certain kind of what people think is a waste fish comes up there and spawns. So that's what they come up with. We have, Jerry and I were out there, photographs of them right along the creek, you know, in the thousands.
What fish are they?
I forget the name.
They're little ugly things.
A scientific name?
I think much of you either, so.
So if we go back to Counselor Sundin's question, is how are people's gut reaction to area two? You think it's a little more sacrificial for the good of the reserve?
I just think because of the old Boise Park, it's very important to keep. You with a topo identify any of these old quarry sites or anything?
Maybe. We have pretty good topo. I haven't.
The old story. Scared. Regardless.
Well, I mean, our topo was via LiDAR and done before the leaves. We did that. I think the LiDAR was flown in March of 22. I've never looked at it in the context of identifying quarries, but it's a tool. It doesn't, you know, we could provide some topo to the Parks Commission for your
Very good.
next steps of adventure.
Some boundaries might come up too. If there's a steep drop off, you might have kind of a more natural boundary than just like the 100-year floodplain, for example. There might be some logical conclusions to draw. Especially when it comes to parcel 2, I think.
Okay, so people are probably on board with area 2, which, you know, there's some fine tuning, you know, because of the Castor right of way extension.
Well, we understand that, you know, you can't impose upon the PG. That's, you know, like, yes.
So Jacob, is that with the question marks, that black line there, is that the proposed extension of Castor?
No, that was we're not really sure what the boundary should be, so we're gonna just kind of put a bunch of question marks in there. But so Castor. So if And if I had more time, I'd make a better map. But you would have Castor coming off like this. That would be the assumed
Oh, gotcha, okay,
boundary
gotcha,
here.
gotcha.
And then, the road kind of curves down this way.
So he's just following that right in that area.
Yeah, just really loosely, because this is a discussion to fine tune. And if there's not a lot of controversy with area 2, that helps with the fine tuning. Obviously, area 3, the discussion suggests there should be some fine tuning. More stuff with the Parks Commission to chew. So are we ready to move northward?
Yeah, I guess I would just like to say, I think the whole thing just makes this, one of the things that makes this a really beautiful place to live. Industry's great, but we need to be pretty too, so it's very cool.
So now the one kind of represents the potential amenity. When I spoke to Scott in March, they talked about maybe that's an area, maybe the building's used as a visitor center, or just some type of amenities to support visitors. And so you have the boundary there, and there's not a lot of intact woodland area, and so the boundary is basically just the extent of the riparian area. A lot of it is underwater during the winter. I don't know if it's an ideal year-round walkway. And then we get into questions of where are we directing people? Let's say it's popular, has a good amount of numbers using it. And those people want to continue their walk into McCormick Park. So then where do we want to put them? Do we want to have a trail along the creek here? Do we want to have a seasonal one here? Should there be infrastructure or some type of path that directs people to the intersection of Castor and Old Portland Road for a safer crossing experience? Because there's less natural area here. It's a little more nebulous, at least in my mind, but our parks commissioners can disagree.
Gets back to the. There's just the area of the roads.
Parking there.
Yeah, your parking can be there that supports it.
Like, if the rec center there is not being utilized, that could be something that could, tell about, the flora and fauna of the area in the reserve. And also discuss the Native Americans and the Tom Mill, and could have a collection or two in there.
And it would be an intelligent location to utilize as far as restrooms. Since we don't have plans to install restrooms along the walking trail. So that would be a really wise use of that building. And then while we haven't discussed this is purely thoughts that are coming to me during this discussion. But the potential of, if we're doing a walking trail along the port side property that could connect with some of the McCormick Park trails there. As far as the city side, connecting the Brown Crossing there, that intersection. So utilizing more of that, the parking space and pedestrian access. It's not just along the creek side, but for safety and ease of access, especially as we're promoting ADA use of the trail systems.
There's also the St. Helens to Scappoose Trail. Don't know the terminal end of it on the side, but it's somewhere in that area, and that could be connected to it. Also, I wanted to mention something that there is the Bailey Bridge, I think it's called, the port owns that's closer to the mouth of the creek. And they're happy for us to use that as a crossing point for the circular trail.
Scott, is that the one by the transfer station?
Yeah.
Okay.
Their concern is vehicle traffic. Pedestrian traffic is not an issue. They don't believe they'll look into it for that. But they're pretty sure that it's gonna be all right for pedestrian traffic. There's also another, when we were walking by it, with this trail, it can go underneath that railroad bridge, so there's not a problem with that on both sides. The structure of the railroad bridge shows that it'd be very easy to build planks across there and have that as a crossing too. It wouldn't cost that much money at all to do that. But the railroad can still stay there and be utilized, and we can still be done. That was one of the, just Sean had brought that up about servicing the railroad, that be something that you won't want to really give up. So, yeah, you're not really asking for that. But it isn't being used very much right now, because these roads are pretty rusty.
I wonder when the last time it was.
And Don, you said there sometimes you see some cars back there and then they're gone.
Yeah, there's a few rail cars back there, and I think as Arcadia gets up and going, they'll load some product in on the raw materials.
You know, they're talking about utilizing,
Yeah,
so.
Makes
yeah.
sense.
but it's not, I don't think impacts.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so really our goal is not to impede on industrial growth, but really make it even more attractive, right? And appease the city, you know, the citizens of St. Helens. You know, the people utilize this area already, people access this area already. They wander through to look at it for all sorts of uses and you know, with the mindset of developing more and more in the other usable and easily developed areas there for the industry, preserving this location, keeping it beautiful, keeping the history, and then promoting that so that it does maintain its beauty and safety for the future would actually increase the attractiveness to those who want to develop in the industrial area.
Thinking back on when Jenny joined the city and all we had was a Parks Commission. And we really didn't contemplate this connectivity between the parks, public spaces and having trails and have that. Her work in updating the Parks Master Plan resulted in the Parks and Trails Commission, which is the capital improvement projects and all of these thoughts about connecting public spaces. This is, still a conversation around that.
This can be connected to the.
And it already is. And in a lot of the areas where, a lot of the areas that are being debated right now already have riparian buffers and floodplains that aren't terribly developable, with or without an easement or a tractor. So I think it's not a huge ask here.
Yeah. I think what was this, the only issue would be that number 3. And urge you to go and check it out at different times of the year. That's it might be developable, but it's also given away a lot that's there. That people are looking to preserve. And I think there would be a number of people who have issues.
So to speak to Dana's point in that area 3, you said the upper 2/3 of lot 37, right? So that's coming off right off that. Yeah, right in there. Wouldn't that be kind of a fair trade-off then? Or-
Like that would be the most logical kind of give.
Right, no, it makes sense to me, right?
Yeah, and but also to the point of having industry jutting right into the rest of the if I'm going to be advocate more on the parks request, having industry jutting into the rest of the reserve,
Well, you're already gonna have a substation adjacent to it.
exactly,
So,
right.
Yeah,
So, but that would be the
Part of the
most logical give.
the buzzing of the substation is,
Yeah. Because again, the closer the industry goes, the more water goes in there, then the less fauna are going to be there, the less birds, you know. Who knows how much disruption to the fish traffic due to, you know, depending on what kind of industry comes in. And just the construction of it, you know, you have to think of the long-term impact of putting industry there on the surrounding area, because wherever you develop, you're not just impacting the footprint of the developed area, you're impacting a greater area around that.
I think having the topo in this area will help kind of define that a little bit more.
Yeah.
There might be a natural break.
Well, that's kind of what I was wondering, is
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
that a
I
natural,
think that
like, way to,
this is
to
not all
delineate
flat.
everything?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we know
Right.
this is not just a big open green field. Like, there's gonna be areas that are easier.
Yeah, so unless you want to beat up on this anymore, I think.
Did everybody get what they needed out of that? I feel like it's still up in the air.
Well,
Well, I mean, but you know what I mean? Is there any direction that we're going on
Well,
this?
one of my big goals is really hoping to get the approval, the official approval to set aside the land and have it rezoned for public use. So that we can move forward on you know, preserving the area. That can't happen unless everyone is in agreement of where the exact borders are. And so if I were to make a request, that we utilize the topo and look at what would be the most logical delineation of that particular border, because if everyone else is okay and agrees to, for the most part, the rest of the red border, then that's easy and good to go. But looking at parcel 3, getting the total view, seeing what would be the most logical developable or not developable land, and then getting a firm boundary, that way you guys can give us the okay on whether or not we can get that zone for public use, which ultimately is going to preserve it. That's the big next step that has to happen for this project, because as long as it's still, you know, developable industrial land, it's not safe for any future use as far as the parks and trails is concerned.
That all makes sense.
But we have to, they can do it all at one go for the zone,
Right.
just do one year. So it needs to be.
And just to push back a little bit on that, the industrial land, the industrial development perspective, when you create parcels, you're gonna have boundaries that have setbacks from property lines.
Yeah.
Where it's an easement or something like that, the potential development can build a bigger building closer to property lines that would impact. And just worried about creating property lines that negatively impact future development
Right.
areas. I think they're competing. I think they could be complementary if they're done right.
Yeah, because you know, it's my understanding, because I haven't heard anything negative really about the project or the concept of moving forward. It's really just finding out exactly where our boundaries are going to be, and then that way we can move forward from there. I don't want to assume, but.
Yeah, so conceptual boundaries. What does it mean? And then what is the precise area? Because we'll need a legal description.
Right,
Because in the future, well, it's this line kind of here.
right,
It's probably not going to work because that's going to result in people arguing over where the line's at. And then figuring out the perfect mechanism for preservation, be it an easement, be it a rezone, be it parcelization. It's good to have those discussions, but once we get closer to each step, that's when we tackle them a little bit more difficult. So we don't have to solve the property line easement thing now. But we sure will at some point.
What is it zoned for right now?
Heavy industrial.
Like, except there's a little
There's-
light industrial along Old Portland Road.
Yeah, along the north side, it's predominantly heavy industrial.
But again, I mean, what was the number for the, we should have.
A surplus of 214
We have 214.
over the next 20 years.
What is the usual technical that you should have?
I don't know.
So you've got a number like 29.
Oh, yeah, what we need for the planning horizon was 20 something.
29, I think.
29.
Yeah, 29.
So
So it's just a question if it's prime. That's where, so from an acreage standpoint, no issue at all. We got a ton. But is it prime? And does that prime categorization elevate it to where, I gotta think about it a little bit?
But we would have a better understanding on whether or not specifically related to parcel 3, how much of that would be prime development due to the topography, right?
Yeah, that'll help that discussion, certainly. Because it's not defined, it's defined as we want it to be defined.
Right.
One other caveat to the EOA, because you keep throwing up the surplus number. This is city owned, so we can control its destiny, right? Like, there's a lot of industrial land in the city that is not city owned. And so, you know, in terms of supporting economic development and industrial growth, I think the fact that this is city owned means more than just saying, oh, acreage out on Port Ave that some private developer owns. That's never gonna get developed, right? Just a caveat there.
I think the top-up would be really helpful for me. Identify the areas.
Okay, well, I think we have a discussion. We have some next steps for folks, unless you wanna attack it anymore.
Hey, Dana, you've done a great job presenting this as well. So thank you for that.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for letting me sit in. And thank you for listening on this project, and I'm super excited to see where I should.
Okay, that takes us to B. So planning commission proactive item, architectural standards.
So we have the proactive items as kind of default in the items. If the commission wants to discuss it, we don't have anything in the packets as it pertains to architectural standards. Commission has talked about folks focusing on windows. I don't know where we're at.
I thought I was gonna see something in the packet. I went back and looked several times. I'm like, where is it?
No, it's just there. If we want to discuss it, it's there for us to discuss it. If not, then
We don't really have a whole lot to discuss at this point. What we're doing right now is sort of, and you guys chime in and help me out. Defining what we want to do and where we want to do it. Do we tackle the whole city? Do we tackle parts of it? We started with windows because we're like, yeah, you know, we're breaking the things up into little pieces. So that's where we're starting with that. And then that's kind of what we've had time for so far.
I think there's consensus that it should be citywide.
Yes, we didn't want to break it up into, we didn't want to just focus on downtown because the newer townhomes and things that are going up aren't going up down here. So we want to make sure that we don't have, say, a big, long wall facing a busy street that doesn't have any windows on, you know, that kind of thing. So just to make things throughout the whole city, rather than just sections of it. We're starting small that way.
Fair enough. Anything more discussion on windows or architectural standards? All right. So C, planning commission proactive item, vacant and underutilized storefronts.
Scott provided something to us today. I think he decided to take some initiative on it, like you mentioned past. And so, yes, you have the helm.
All right. Yeah, I didn't. I was foolish enough to volunteer for this. And I've been regarding it ever since. I looked at it, I got a little overwhelmed by the whole thing, looking at it. Don't really have a defined scope on this. So this is just kind of what I was thinking about, put on paper, and what I'm looking for actually just help. Pretty much, just help. Input, where do people think we should go? This is what I think, are more of the larger aspects of it. So what I hope, this kind of helps. We discuss a little bit, try to scope this a little bit more, because as it stands right now, it's pretty beginning. I just need some guidance.
Well, thank you for taking the initiative. Volunteering.
Say that now, wait a while.
Well, we had some subcommittees, but when we found out we couldn't have subcommittees, so
Yeah.
that made things a little more difficult. We did talk about meeting up again publicly, of course, with Ministry Lions. They've had some experience with this too, and they gave us a really great presentation a little over a year ago. But we have a lot of new commissioners, so we thought it would be good to have them come.
Yeah, there, or they could just deal with, everybody with that.
Yeah.
With that, I'm kind of looking at, kind of figure out just right now. What kind of getting specific actions to take prior to this next. So give me some idea of where people want this to go. So we can go through this. I mean, I don't know if we've fully defined what we want on this by the problem statement. Does have just a few things. This is not an exhaustive list on any of this, and it's also there are things that have been done previously, but are they up to date and that type of stuff. So it might be listed like they haven't been done yet or anything like that. This might not be the case. So if you look through it, our considerations was our agreed definition of or underutilized storefront. I've looked at these things like Astoria here. This particular one is in San Francisco, Hood River. They're all very similar as you would like unoccupied, more than 30 days. 3 months, 6 months.
Into the Astoria, I also looked into Pendleton and Warrenton too, on some of those, because there's a lot of different municipalities that have been down this road for sure.
Yeah, and then they go to doing their fixes are in more tailored towards whatever they're facing. So we'll just need to find out what we think we're facing so we can tailor it to what we want to do. With the Astoria example, I mean, they did a lot of work on that. And it's very intricate. It also goes with architectural standards, and it's all interrelated. And yeah, that would be a piece of work to try to adopt something similar to that. And I'm not sure. I mean, we do have some historic buildings here and that, but not to the extent that Astoria has. It might be a little overkill with some of what they have. But so yeah, that's my thinking on the story. It's the deep dive in there, and it takes like I say, it takes you and to do something like that. It's a piece of work. Like what I was saying about I think we have a vacancy register here in Allen's. I'm not sure how up to date it is. Main Street has a listing of properties and owners, and which is gives some of the information too. Just not sure how up to date it is. One thing I noticed already is that there is the issue of ownership being local or further away, which is can be problematic with that. And it seems our furthest owner from their list is from Portland, so it's it's not too bad in that aspect. I was hoping people would read through it and chime in here. What they thought. And, if you go to. Potential next steps, I did contact Jacob and he was nice enough to respond to me. And took some time, was what I'm trying to get to, was that's resources. So, I need going forward on that, I would have to have your okay to, contact them and with this in mind. To discuss these types of things. This is actually Jacob's. In his email, he suggested something.
The potential next steps, that's you, Jacob?
No, he said about
Oh, that's-
contacting other members of the city.
Yeah, got you.
So, and we had discussed last time, engaging historians and Baker City and. But I was just thinking that, well, we wouldn't want to have a bunch of people calling Jacob and taking up all his time. So I wouldn't want to do that to somebody else. So. It might be a better option to go to maybe. At one of your mayor forums or this League of Oregon Cities, that type of stuff, maybe that could. You could put out feelers about, doing, discussing it with other cities. They're gonna, so we have just an invitation to engage.
Mike DeRoya, I talked to him this morning, our building official. He said he talked to the Astoria building official. I guess the Astoria building official position has changed several times in the last couple of years. The building official, that particular position didn't have too much involvement in Astoria's efforts pertaining to the discussion. So I know that's not that much
You
intelligence.
can cross them off your list.
Yes.
Um,
The Astoria building official.
Get anything on him?
Okay.
I just wanted to state, because I am kind of nearing my end of time with the city, and one of your questions is, what is the city's view of the current state? Has the situation stabilized? What does stabilization look like? I've been here 12 years, and when I first started working here, the downtown had, I mean, this is anecdotal, but like I would say 3 times as many vacancies as it does now. And just in the last year, seeing progress with the Main Street Revitalization Grant, Dawn to Dusk coming online on the corner. We're seeing Grace's Antique Building being rebuilt. We're seeing like all of this new revitalization. Plymouth Pub wasn't there when Captured by Portraits had left. Like there was so much downtown vacancy. Beyond the Forest being there instead of the Union Hall, particularly in the Riverfront District, I've seen a massive shift. We have a bakery now, there's a record shop. I feel like things have stabilized, especially, yeah, and especially with the infrastructure projects down here, I feel like spaces are more marketable. There are long-term underutilized storefronts, but I think it's a property owner, it's a property specific thing. And I don't know that we need a citywide code to address like specific properties that are, and so that's my feeling on this of 12 years of seeing the progress.
I just asked on owners downtown here, but.
Do you feel like there's a problem?
Vacant
Yeah.
storefronts,
Yeah.
vacancies, vacancies.
Yes.
Like, these things are getting snapped up. So
Yes.
they get vacant
Yeah.
right now.
Right.
But I mean, that's good right now, but maybe,
Sure.
2 years from now or whatever.
Yeah.
And if we have another downturn or
Sure.
COVID, people,
Yeah.
return to where it was.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So, I mean, but then are we looking at a short-term solution, trying to get, these things done? Obviously, we might not need that right now, but. And so that make it all moot, or do we looking at something more long-term?
Yeah.
With these bases. We're also looking at, underutilized, areas. Yet, Jennifer Schumacher sent me an article that was good. I've read a number of articles. This was good in that, with they had some type of, code where you can divide these buildings, but the front portion has to be commercial. And the back can be used, you know, for services or anything like that. You know, that seems like to me, it was, it looked like a good idea. For some of these buildings.
Jenny, has there been any conversations with some of the vacant properties that have been sitting there, like i.e. Fat Boys Pizza?
I feel like Main Street has had conversations with owners.
I'm just kind of curious on, you know, what, if they have the property, are they just sitting on it? There's no intention, no motivation, not planning on doing anything, or is it financially driven that they don't have the
These are all,
funds?
yeah, good questions. I don't know.
Yes, but they're, from what I understand, around. It's very difficult. You don't want to talk to anybody about that.
Kind of need a carrot and stick situation.
Maybe.
I've talked to him, but yeah, I don't. In 9 days and
And
there's,
I'm not pointing out that
Yeah.
specifically, I just meant.
that's the one that always comes to mind.
Yeah, it's the quintessential one. It's especially because it's multiple fronts, right?
Right.
It's almost a half a block.
Yeah.
It's full of his personal belongings.
And it's been that way for decades.
And then
Can
type
you
since
imagine
Fat
the
Boys
history
Kitchen.
that's in there, that you just want to get in there.
I have been in there, so it's a lot of potential. It's a great space, but it'd be a lot of work too.
It's big in there.
Or we could try to find something that knows the folks very well and approaching that guy. Another way.
I think Astoria was unique because it deals with really more of like the vacation type rental tourism, you know, that aspect of it too. They had,
It is now, I mean, 30 years.
right, but I meant
It's pretty grand.
when they changed for their regulations, right? That's one of the
Yeah, maybe
considerations.
20.
Yeah, and then I think, was it they brought stuff in, I can't recall, but when I was browsing through it, like some additional stuff in 2023 or something of the sort. But would it be reasonable to do like a contrasting comparison for the other municipalities that have this? So whether it was Hood River and what they were actually looking, you know, we don't have to take one model and just adopt it, but we can take,
Yeah.
extrapolate information from other ones that make sense.
Yeah, but I think it'd be best to try to define problems first, so we can somewhat tailor to it.
Yeah, like to Jenny's point, we need to look and see what's actually out there. Based on what we're just,
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think it's.
what has been versus
fully
what's now,
defined,
yeah.
'cause it's a lot
What's the
further.
issue we're trying to resolve?
Yeah,
And I don't think
that's-
that question has been answered.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
So. And we. Still.
Well, what do you think the issue is? What's the problem? If we have vacant
I think-
storefronts that,
In order to define the issue, I think it's actually having to go speak with the business owners, let them define it for us.
well, that's what their rationale is, but for the city, what's our problem statement? The fact that we do not want vacant storefronts, right?
Well, I don't think the owners would want vacant storefronts either, so. To have some vibrancy to. Rather than skipping number of storefronts, having to go to the next one. So we're just looking. For me, I think, I mean, I would hate for us to define the problem for them. And it impacts them, but have them define the problem for us, so we can mold that. Try to achieve something.
Yeah, I thought that, I perceived it as two problem statements, one for the city. And then there would be a subset of what the actual challenges or problem is for the actual owners of the vacant properties. And that could be a gamut of different reasons, right? You could have somebody that's 90 years old that there's just no point to build out a property, that you could also have a financial aspect. So what are we trying to achieve as a city? What would we like to see? And then in addition to that, what is the driving force? What's the rationale behind these vacant businesses and properties, right?
I think what we talked about before too is what can we do to help them?
Right.
That's what you need to do. I mean, it's gonna take businesses to put in these vacant storefronts. Well,
Yeah.
quit focusing on the empty windows and start focusing on businesses. And how you're gonna get the businesses down here.
Well, not only that, the actual buildings themselves, what needs to be done? Why are they empty?
Well,
Right.
and that will come second,
Yeah.
because you're gonna go to Jacob and then you're gonna go to Mike and you're gonna go, oh,
Yeah.
screw it.
Owner,
Can't, no,
Well, they may see something more positive.
Or
Out
they
there-
just. or
out there
just
second-
say Again, somebody's 90 years old and it's just not something at this point in their life that they're interested in doing.
there's some place that have code that say, you have to have everything up to date. That could be something, that you consider.
Well, yeah, that all depends too on what you're getting into. If you fix two things, you gotta fix the third thing.
Swiss cheese.
For me, it always comes back to the difference between vacant and underutilized, because I can guarantee you, if you were to ask him, why is your building vacant? He's gonna say it's not vacant.
Yeah.
I'm in there all the time. My stuff's in there. I think prime example is the bank building, underutilized. It wasn't vacant, but it was underutilized.
That goes to, what, an agreed definition of vacant and underutilized. It's that there's, a number of ways, number of cities, it's similar. But they have different ones.
I think that's a really valid point from Counselor Cindy. No, I mean, you put it pretty simply right there. That's the reality of it.
It may just be a matter of, okay, what are the properties that are concerning people generating this conversation? What are the stories behind those properties? Is there some similarity between those stories and does that help shape our path?
A good way to summarize it, yeah.
And is this something that we do, or do we partner with Main Streets and it's the,
I think you've got to look at Main Street's success.
yeah, boots on the
They're
ground?
bringing, I mean, I think it's almost $750,000 now they brought to the city. You guys haven't had any work to do or anything. And
We have to permit the projects.
there's some money, so you got money out of the deal, see? But no, I mean, they're a real success, but they have to go through the state of Oregon and everything, but they work directly with the owner. And the owner has to be committed and they have to prove that they can pay it too, so that's a great process, so I mean.
One drawback about that is, I don't know if Main Street is represented all the owners.
What I'm saying is an owner has to go to them and say, I've got a project. And then they look at the project with a bunch of other projects. So it's an avenue for a business to get a leg up to do what they want to do.
Like initiatives.
What would you propose the best way to go about getting information on the vacant businesses or underutilized, vacant and or underutilized? And information from the business owners or property owners on why it is either vacant or utilized?
I guess, contact people, maybe the owners themselves or, adjacent building owners, or businesses, I think it's just, it's discussing with the businesses themselves.
But who does that? I think that's where my question is, like, who actually does that, who initiates the conversation?
And I think that's what we're talking about. Partnering with Main Street, because I think they've done a lot of that.
They've done that already.
Done some of that.
Yeah.
But there may be ways to fill in the gaps. They may not have answered all of the questions Jacob just lined out, I think they're absolutely a partner. I don't think that they're taking the lead on this. They've said multiple times before that like the city is a partner with Main Street, but Main Street is not leading this effort. So, yeah, right. But they've done some data generation and they should certainly share that information with you. So you're not asking the same person, the same exact questions.
Yes.
So
Try to make sure they got their story straight.
Bring your FBI badge
Yeah.
this time.
You get a badge with us. Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, what are specific actions we want to take now until the next meeting?
Reduce permits and system development charges. Not right here now.
Yeah, I was gonna say reducing.
I mean, that's done by other cities to promote some development. I don't know how it works.
Well, I mean, it's,
Talking about reducing SDC.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry.
that could be, you know.
I mean, that's
but-
one avenue cities have looked at. I don't know how it's worked for
Well,
them.
renovating an existing building isn't likely to trigger new impact to the system anyway. They're already connected to sewer with a commercial development in the past, so it's, you already netted out. Unfortunately, you had new development, right?
It can be reduced, never mind. Are you leaving town?
Jacob's talked about, carrots and sticks before you have incentives or penalties kind of thing where. I think on the incentive side of it, you have grants like Main Street has, so CLG program that the city runs some money through, and we also have part of the urban renewal plan is supporting facade improvements for local businesses to kind of incentivize them to make investments.
Is there a tool?
There is a budget in the urban renewal plan for that, but money is not quite there yet, but it will be. On the regulatory side, that's it's to be pretty unpopular sometimes. There's conversations about constitutional rights and property rights and things of that nature. So I've seen cities do vacant building registry where you're required, if your building's vacant over a certain amount of time, you need to register and pay a fee just to keep an eye on it, maybe incentivize them to keep thinking about their building being vacant. And then there's the Astoria models where they can actually impose penalties and things. There's a lot there, and I think between the city and between Main Street and the goal to have an active, vibrant Main Street is getting some of those non-retail uses off Main Street, right? So
And we haven't even really touched on competition. They feed into each other, they can feed into each other, you get correct opposition, and what would that look like? Our business. So, I'm not sure how we should approach that, or if we should be approaching that. We should just like dog eat dog out there, or want to put some guidance in. There's also incentivize. We're low on one type of business, incentivize something to get done. I do have a list of possible businesses that are likely to be around here. Probably are some other things, but what is a healthy mix, like all groups. There, I'm not sure, there's a place in Kansas called Lucas, Kansas. And all they do is the small town, flat spot in the road. And what they do is park. And it's all just park places. And they get a lot of tourists there. So I mean, do you want to have a certain type of aspect you want to concentrate on, or you want to go wider? It's just things that I think we need to think about this. They can sort them too.
So that's getting to economic development planning.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a whole other.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started here,
They're interested.
we had a downtown strategic plan and it talked about a mix of uses and trying to attract variety of uses. But that plan is so out of date now, it wouldn't even make sense, but
Talk about video stores then.
VHS specifically, yeah. But I mean that, downtowns do become big enough where you have to develop a strategic plan to talk about a mix of uses and, you know, incentivizing certain industries and, you know, yeah, that's absolutely a Main Street downtown development.
And another note, I ran across was that, this goes to the antique store that's being redeveloped now. Doing something about the parking restrictions and the grandfather. There are some people, or some places that have done, you know, done away with that. And are not so parking driven. You know, so it's more like a city, you know, maybe like Burlington, where you have. If you build something, you know, a restaurant, you're not really obligated that much to provide parking. Whereas, you know, some of this, we are. So, and also, you know, without the parking, it actually helps drive the livability, you know, just getting out of your cars, people walking around, it gives a place of vibrancy. That's my own personal opinion.
We're back to next steps.
Yes, we're back to next, well, let's get this down.
Okay, we need a little more data.
Yes. So. Contacting business owners and that after assist or building owners. Is that what we've landed on?
Do we need to identify which ones we're gonna be contacting first, which ones we're concerned with?
And then also reaching out to our partners Main Street to see if they have any information or data so that we're not also bugging or nagging the business owners at this point by information if they already have it available.
Well, I talked to Marcy and she gave me
Okay.
it's everything, but just.
So we can fill in the blanks there.
Yeah. But, not, you know, a lot of crowd. I mean,
I think that seems like the next essential step is what are the properties of concern? Because you're trying to build that story. To figure out how is the story going to have a happy ending?
Right.
We got to write the first chapters. And I think identifying those properties and the stories behind them is, to me, a logical next step.
I think a profound part of that story is what Councilor Sundin said. It's resonated with me. Is it vacant or is it underutilized?
Yeah.
There's a very big difference there. So I think that should be one of the matrix points there that is collected. And if it's underutilized, then is it financially driven or what is the story there? Yeah,
I mean,
utopic
a
in
lot
that
of
reasons.
it's overlap. You know, like you said, they don't know. Gonna have financially able to use it, all of it, or if it's a building's out vacant. Could be the same thing. So there's a lot of overlap, I think, with underutilized. And another thing I just want to throw out there, when I've been looking at this, it's not that the cities actually look at both vacant storefronts and vacant residents. They do joint, let's see, a lot of them just that could be that. Things I looked at, and geared towards that, and then it could be skewed. You know, data samples rather small, but I don't know. And it's could also be for picking on a certain segment of our population, the other, and not the other. Sense of urgency. Still looking at. I think, yes, identifying the properties of concern should be our first. And then maybe, deciding what the parameters of our questions for those properties too. But I think, again.
Should we be defining those now, or should we just, the next step is identifying the properties and then cultivating the questions that would be asked consistently with those property owners?
Yeah, I mean, but that might take a little time.
For the questions,
Well, identifying the properties could be.
yeah.
Well, that could take,
Maybe until the next joint meeting.
yeah,
It seems like that should be
maybe
the
we
next
should
step.
think about it and, decide. What properties and what concern.
Yeah, the group discusses it. The discussion helps narrate what the concerns are.
Yeah.
And I think the inventory will help filter the other data and information we need.
It'd be nice if the inventory was a geographic, like a map. So you can see the distribution rather than just a list, in my opinion.
I think we can make that happen.
Yeah.
Like, we have a next step, so by the next joint meeting, we'll have hopefully a list of properties.
Yeah. Still up in the air, but, I think, what properties be concerned.
Well, I think what is Main Street, they're a collective of people. So that collective of people should have properties they've identified. I would make sure that the list you were given was based on a collective discussion, not an individual's discussion. I just don't know, but we just want to make sure that's representative of the group. Planning Commission, if they want to take it on as a proactive item, I'm sure the Planning Commission has ideas on what buildings and properties are concerns. And so, and maybe the council does too. But that seems like a way for those groups to provide that information.
Should, if you want to. You come up with an ideas of what you want, email me and. Pull it. Get back to us.
Well, and this will be on planning commission agendas as proactive items. So if you have to ask a question or be on the agenda.
Well,
Everyone,
I'm just talking since we're doing with possibly the coast.
yeah.
We'll
Sure.
have at least one, if not two council members that are every meeting, right?
Keep an eye on this.
That they do.
So do you want to just do that, ourselves individually come up with a list? Or,
Well, what I heard was maybe a best method would, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to have someone, possibly you're great at volunteering, but contact Main Street for a list of information that they already have. And then we can, and maybe if that can be distributed to,
Updated, added to, discussed.
and then we can fill in the blank with anything else that the council or planning commission has identified that may be outside of what by Main Street.
and what they might not have, what they deem as vacant. Or things like that, because what I have looked at from what they've sent me, they'll give me property over there.
If council and the rest of the commission were identifying the properties that we collectively had identified too, we could contrast and compare with that list, right? And just cross them off if that's the case.
It's in our code, but I'm not sure that we actually do.
We do.
We
It's
did-
just not up to date. I have.
It's like really old.
I remember for several years, it seems like there was traction on it, but if I was gonna, I'm not a betting man,
But then again.
but I'd bet a lot of money it hasn't been updated in several years.
Yeah, but then
Great
again, it's
opportunity
not,
to
we're looking
update.
for the ones that
That's not bad.
haven't been occupied for a couple of years anyway. But it's still pretty relevant.
Did Marcy email you the list or did she hand something? Did you email it to their?
I mean, just a quick question to say, what was your parameter for vacant, you was it underutilized? Was it just vacant? Like, just ask.
The determination of what constitute vacant or.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah, my fear is for the general population, it's too technocrat. The initial is, what is your concern as a citizen? What property concerns you because it's not being used much? That, because ultimately, we're all human beings and we react to emotion. And if we try to get too detailed up front, I think it's just gonna scare people off and getting open-minded comments.
That's part of my concern. I'd rather come up with a list of we're concerned about ... rather than we're concerned with this individual or this
Yeah.
building. I don't know that we should be singling out individuals and business owners. I'd rather come up with a set of parameters. These are the kind of things that we're concerned about. And these are the people or businesses that fit into those categories. Rather than, I don't want to go after people and
Yeah.
That's what Main Street did. They didn't identify, they looked at each individual storefront. But then they talked to the people and found out more about what the aspect of their life is and what they think. So it's pretty complete. I don't think you've got.
I think it'd be helpful if we all could see that.
Help with brainstorming of the questions that we really want to ask.
Just to know what's already been done and what makes sure we're not duplicating things.
And we can come up with a, like a cache of questions, so we don't have to ask every single business, every single question. We can apply questions that would apply to that business. Have
think
like
if
a
you-
stockpile of them.
You find out what they did, you'll find out they've
Yeah.
pretty complete what they were asking.
Yeah, be interesting to see that.
Yeah, it's gonna be valuable for what they were there.
And it's been so long since they came and presented to us.
Well, that was just an overlook.
And that was an
you know,
overall, and it was still impressive.
Yeah,
Is it also agreeable to individually bring in like our own properties that we have identified at the next meeting as well? From the time we get that list, if there's some that we identify that are not on there, it seems like that would be a good opportunity while we're discussing the properties to bring that up.
I'd almost like there to be some communication with the property owner before we bring their name or their business into a public meeting. They're watching a meeting online and they find out that we're concerned about their building and that's the first that they've heard about it. It almost seems like there should be some communication ahead of time to let them know that we're concerned and this is why, and where are you coming from? What's your situation?
Maybe it's not identifying that specific, it's just identifying what appears to be vacant or underutilized properties. And not specifically,
To say their names.
Exactly.
This is how many we found and that kind of thing.
Yeah, with Oregon's ethics laws, I think that's tough. Because how do you discuss it internally without having a meeting?
I don't think we can. I think we get the information and it has to be discussed at the next meeting. Public,
Because it could result in a policy decision later. Yeah.
we can have serial meetings, so. It's more of a getting that initial information and then data collection your own. And then bringing it back to the public meeting.
Speaking of serial meetings, we can't even have serial anymore at meetings. We need to talk about that briefly.
Oh.
Because of the ethics commission.
Yeah, I was looking for water last time.
Thursday.
It's like the only time I've ever wanted water and I'm like, really? No water.
Okay, there's no proposal for, on the properties. Of concern, utilizing the Main Street of the data for that. Using the St. Helens, their data. And then, how about if I, do a walk and, look. And just
Updated.
identify,
Yeah, I mean, some of them could be not vacant anymore, right?
just go walk the, on the building and find out.
Yeah.
Then come back and.
You just, yeah, you didn't get voluntold, you volunteered.
We're gonna have so much to talk about it already.
Is there any?
Yeah, I think so. So no more treats. No more snacks, no more beverages for public meetings.
Yeah,
Until a policy is developed?
That was what came from the city recorder's office.
Yeah,
so does that mean that's going to Crooked Creek now?
Yes,
it means bring your own water to meetings, bring your own coffee, bring your own snacks. Until we
On
can-
the issue, there's a decision that came out of Oregon Government Ethics Commission that was determined that this, basically the snacks and food provided were a taxable fringe benefit. So we'd have to come up with some random calculation on how to do that. And so different cities are handling it different ways. The League of Oregon Cities working on a model ordinance that'll will solve the issue. We'll bring it out, we'll adopt a policy that makes it part of your official compensation, which is very much, but
I just want to know which city actually wrote in for the opinion. That's what that Beaverton did. Like, we can thank you.
well, it was based on a.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I thought they just wrote in for an opinion on it. I'm like, why would you write?
Good
an
question.
opinion?
That's a whole nother. That's a whole nother.
and then another thing as far as benefits for committees. Because of the budget, we took out planning commission stipends. Last time we did that was for the Great Recession, post-Great Recession budgets.
So we don't get a stipend anymore?
It's not in the upcoming budget.
And since we canceled the June,
That's
sent out your check. Your check was sent out recently. June was canceled, so that was the last check for stipends, quarterly stipends. For the indefinite future until that gets changed.
And it is something that
the
we,
last time I got a notification, it said they took $30.
it's something that we talked with the commission. I know you're new, so you weren't privy to
I
those.
wasn't aware I was getting a check, to be honest, so.
And that was the most typical response we got was from new people. Oh, I didn't even know I got a check, so it wasn't a big deal. But we just wanted to let you know,
There was a reason.
just trying to save the budget as much as we can.
Per meeting.
So for our other business, we had ethics and stipends. Anything else for other business?
No, I don't have anything else.
Okay. Anybody else have anything else? All right, this meeting is then adjourned.